we're leading up to Mother's Day, and I wanted to definitely take the time to appreciate you before that special day that comes up every year, and knowing that you are appreciated every single day. But we wanted to really expand this conversation for the purposes of all the other mothers and children that are, having this experience of Mother's Day every year. There's so much anxiety sometimes around holidays and around gift giving and around appreciation of others. And our lives are individually busy with our own families. And as as children get older, right, as we get older as individuals, sometimes we lose touch with those who matter most to us, not because it's in anything intentional, but because there's our attention is drawn in multiple different directions. So we wanted to, we talked a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago and have had this in the works for a little while. But I'm happy that we're having this conversation. I'm happy that we will get a chance to, hopefully, I'll get a chance to learn some things about how you feel as a mother as you see your children grow and advance and spread their wings, and maybe even you'll learn a little bit about how I feel and the experiences that I've had over the years with just watching even our own relationship develop and evolve and change over time. So thank you for agreeing to have the conversation. We're thankful for everyone who's listening in to this conversation. But I really wanted to just jump into it and get started because our topic and our theme is all about Mother's Day, and we understand the commercialization of Mother's Day, right? How many bouquets are purchased on Mother's Day? How many plants and flowers and cards are purchased on that day to represent what or to symbolize the love that we have for our mothers? But we want to get really beyond the symbol, right? Beyond the flowers, beyond the kind words in the cards and the notes and the text messages that are going back and forth, and the Mother's Day brunches, even the times where we are able to get in touch with each other and sit down and maybe have a meal. We want to get beyond the symbolism of everything and really get down into, well, what does it mean? How do you feel on the inside? How does watching your child grow and develop and move out of your home and have their own family and their own children, and how all that impacts a mother's love, right? And how that impacts, even from a child's perspective, a son or a daughter's love for their mother. So if we can jump into just talking about love generally and maybe get your perspective and experience on having children and how that impacted and maybe expanded your own capacity for loving others. And that's I think a great place for us to start.
Well, it is, I'm so elated to be here with you. And I just everything that you shared at the beginning, I love you back. I love you more. And I'm excited to have this conversation, like you said, not only regarding our own personal interaction and what may be revealed, but definitely that this conversation may inspire or encourage other mothers out there, or even other adult immediately when you said that, my mind went to my mother. So this is a chain, that is created.
Yep.
I'm not a mom in a vacuum. I'm a
Right.
mom who had a mom who heavily influenced the way I love my children. So just real briefly, my mother thought she was barren. She could not have children. She was well into her 30s by the time she conceived me. And that was after surgeries, that was after years of her siblings having children and her being the perpetual auntie, but never the mom. So by the time I did come along, from her perspective, I was her miracle child, her blessing from God. And she had been thinking about being a mom and dreaming about and anticipating that one day she would be a mother. So when I was born and came into her life and she was blessed with me, she poured her whole self into me, her entire world. She would often say that her life just completely changed, not necessarily just from the fact that I was in her life, but because she intentionally had a lifestyle prior to her having me that she felt was not conducive to her being a good mom. So she made some changes intentionally. So I was raised in an environment where parenting and being a mother was like almost the highest rung to achieve, right? So that in turn caused me to value motherhood very, very highly and not take it casually. So, and you all are a recipient of me being a product of my mother's mothering, if that all makes sense. The way I viewed love based on the love of a mother, based on the priority my mother made me in her life, I duplicated that. Motherhood to me meant everything, and it informed the lion's share of my decisions during those. I'll just go on and say 40 years of me parenting. It informed the lion's share of my decisions. I made a determination early on that I would not be a casual parent where my children would spend more time with babysitters or with other caregivers and not with me. So I remember my first son when you were a little, I think you may be 3, 4 months old. Your dad and I wanted to go to the movies. I left you with my mom, and back then there were no cell phones or anything like that. But I just thought about you the entire time. I can't even tell you what movie it was we went to see, and I couldn't wait to get back to the house to reunite with my baby, with my little one. And you'll be able to share and give some insight as to whether you believe that that carried on even as our family expanded and me being very, very, very hands-on. And that was for me, being present, being engaged, being hands-on was the epitome of demonstrating my love for my children.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And before we really jump into even my experience, I think what you touched on regarding your own mother is very important to think about because, we grow up with a narrative from our parents that becomes a part of our subconscious, right? So to even share the story that because your mother, my grandmother, believed that she was barren, and then was able to, get pregnant and have you, and then decide and realize that because I'm assuming also like the joy that comes along with the relief that comes along with the excitement that comes along with finally being able to achieve something that's so meaningful to most mothers. She was willing to change her entire life in order to focus her attention on this wonderful blessing that you were in her life. And then that narrative, then it sounds like you said it very seamlessly, but you didn't really point it out. That narrative that she had also became your narrative, right? It also became, even though under different circumstances, right? You didn't believe that you were barren, you didn't have the same life story that your mother had, but you picked up on kind of the spirit of having children and being there for my child and framing my world around supporting them and being there for them and being present in their lives is important, right? And it's of primary importance. And now I can say that yes, that same narrative, right? Without really, and that's I guess maybe the first thing that I've learned today. I didn't really understand the nuance of the amount of change that your mother implemented in her own life when she had you, but the message of your, I want to be a present parent
Yeah.
informs just about every, if not every single decision that I make in my own life, right? It informs the person who I marry, right? Because now we have to be aligned with our children are very important to us. It's more important than career. It's more important than socializing with our friends. It's more important than any of these other things because like otherwise we wouldn't be able to maintain a happy home if we're not aligned in that same way, right? So even in choosing a partner and how I approach parenting definitely comes from, I guess I was thinking came from you, but it also has a large portion coming from your mother, my grandmother. And then of course she's not here to share it, but I wonder what her experience of her own mother was in her own in her own childhood and what that narrative was from her and whether she was passing down a narrative in terms of prioritizing you, or if she was shifting a narrative that she experienced for herself.
very much shifting a narrative. And this is so interesting the way this conversation is going because these are things that I necessarily thought that we would be discussing, but they're so important. So my mother, on several occasions throughout my childhood, mentioned her relationship with her mom. My mom was somewhere in the middle of a family of she had six siblings and she was somewhere in the middle, and she expressed on several different occasions that coming up she didn't feel loved. She
Mhm.
didn't feel loved. She felt that her mom was preoccupied outside the home, and her grandmother was the person in the household that really provided the attention and the nurturing and the love, while her actual biological mother was living her life um, and just had other priorities besides like being that hands-on, engaged, loving, caring mother to her children. And it's really something because my mom recalled and would like I said, she mentioned this a few times as I was growing up. She recalled an instance when she said maybe around 5 or 6 years old, that she asked her mother, I mean, and this is so deep for me, that a child that young would be in a set of circumstances and in an environment that would cause them to ask
Mhm.
their mother if they loved them.
Mhm.
So my mother asked my grandmother, like, do you love me?
Mhm.
Do you love me? So there was such a void of that connection and that embrace and that love and that environment that was created then from her to me, and then from me to you all. So definitely with her, that's where the shift occurred.
Right. And that, I mean, that in itself is a very powerful statement because I think a lot of people, especially young people who haven't had great relationships with their parents when they're young, before kids, are really afraid of having children, right? Because they're afraid that they're going to just repeat the same mistakes that their parents made. They don't know how they can escape that narrative, how they can escape that almost tradition of whatever it may be, whatever negative word you want to put in the blank there, of a lack of love, of a lack of attention, of rejection at times. And it's powerful, I believe, for people to hear that, someone experienced that and then took all that and they shifted it into a positive direction and said, well, I'm going to change that with my child, right? And then not only was it powerful in that transition from her generation to yours, but then it now becomes something that's passed on. And now, I experience it, and now my children experience it. And now for generations to come is the hope that it just becomes a norm, right? This is what we do, right? This is how we were raised. We received love, we received attention, we received support, and we give that to our. Another thing that I want to bring up that you also mentioned is, to the point of, or to the theme of, I guess, getting beyond the bouquet, getting beyond, the cards and all the nice things that are nice to do, and we should all, participate if we want to, whatever extent we want to participate in that, in all of that. But beyond that, it's knowing each other, right? And we all, I don't know if you've heard of the five love languages. Are you familiar with these?
I am familiar with them.
Okay.
Yeah,
So there's physical touch,
right.
affirmations,
Mhm.
acts of service, quality time, and gifts, gift giving, right?
Right.
And thinking about my own life and thinking about, well, how do I like to receive love? Because a lot of times also the way a person likes to receive love is not necessarily the same way they prefer to give love.
Right.
So,
This is true.
what are my love language? What's my love language in terms of how I like to receive love? And I can definitely say that it is completely tied to how I received love from you as a child, right? So words of affirmation, affirming me as a child, like thinking in my mind that I can do anything, that I can become anything that I wanted, that there was nothing that was too big or too, insurmountable for me as a child, translates into my adulthood to where, if someone's not speaking that way to me, it automatically feels like, oh, well, you don't love me. You don't care about me. Right. Because I feel that sense of love and appreciation and even being just seen generally when there are this affirmative words from others. But I prefer to give love in acts of service, right? I'm not typically the person who's necessarily like, I will affirm others, but I tend to act in service beyond or before I am very vocal about how much I love the person, right? So it's almost as if I want to show you more than I tell you, right?
Mm.
And that also is a part of how I
Wow.
receive it as well. But I know that there is like this shift between how I give and how I receive. So I'm curious from you, given thinking of yourself as like the conduit between your mother's experience and how you've raised your own four children. Um, do you see any differences there between like how you prefer to show love to your children versus how you received love from your mother?
Wow, that's really a heavy question to unpack. And I would say there is a difference. My mother was from a completely different generation, and although she did make a dramatic shift from what her experience was, she did not necessarily have the tools or the skill set to communicate that love in in a variety or an array in an array of different ways. So the love was there. It was not necessarily demonstrated through, so I would get words of affirmation. I would get a lot of other words so too. There was a mixed bag of all types of things. As an adult, when I look back and I think about it, and right here, live and in person in this conversation, I recognize and I understand that she did the best with what she had. However, when we speak of the different love languages, and I think of my mom, it wasn't her love wasn't necessarily demonstrated through um if there was some verbal affirmation. Like I said, it was mixed with other things. It wasn't necessarily tied to what she gave me or gifts. Now that generation, when you talk about acts of kindness, there was this philosophy: if you have a roof over your head and I'm feeding you and you have clothes on your back, therefore I love you. So
Right.
so a lot of it was very
So
minimal.
in a sense, that's acts of service, right? I'm serving. I'm serving my support of you and my love of you as evidenced by how I serve and provide for what you need.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So a little heavier in that area.
Hmm.
I can show you better than I can tell you, something that you just mentioned in
Right.
terms of the way you demonstrate your love. So that is was my experience with my mom in my childhood. And what I did in terms of because although I knew my mom loved me, I knew that she loved me. There was no doubt in my mind about that. I also, when it came to the way I parented my children, I knew that there were still gaping holes and areas that there was a lot left to be desired. And I just feel as though I took it even farther.
Yeah.
And you would have to shed more light on that. But when you first read those love languages, I
All
in
of
my
them.
mind, and because my whole philosophy and perspective on being a mom, that your children really need all of those.
Yes.
They need the words of affirmation. They need the hugs and the
Right.
kisses and the love that's unconditional. It's not punitive, right? It's like, well, you do what I want you to do, therefore I love you. I remember one of the things that I would say to you all, it's like, I'm going to love you regardless. however, I know you can do better, or however, I know the purpose for your life is larger than this, or you have a standard to live up to. But at the end of the day, you got mama love. I recall that. I don't even know where these things came from, but I understood at a really young age that a child knowing that their parent loved them. And again, that stems back to that environment that my mother described to me, where she had to ask her mother if
Mhm.
she loved her, that I never wanted my children to have one doubt,
Right.
not one nanosecond of their life ever,
Mhm.
that whether I love them or not. So I was very intentional on making certain that you all knew that I was committed to you, that I not only was I present, you were getting the hugs and the kisses and the I love yous, and did my best with what the
Right.
tools that I had to communicate that to you all. I don't believe necessarily though that like even with my mom, and this may be the whole thing with more associated or impacted by being a single parent, the whole, gift giving and all of that. I mean, that brings in like financial
Mhm.
capabilities and all. So that wasn't necessarily tied to love
Mhm.
or expression of love by what I did in terms of tangible or material things, but certainly with connectivity, engagement, heart, presence, commitment, loyalty, no matter what, no matter what, being there and supporting with those words of affirmation and
Well, yeah, I
with
mean,
the
so you pointed out a couple of times, doing the best you can with what you have, right? So your mother
right,
not having necessarily the tools, and even with a brief understanding through this conversation of what her experience was, how could she have had, this full array of tools? In essence, I think if you think about, the best attributes of a human being, it is, to cause positive change. But positive change means what? It's a change away from some negative experience, right? So then we all suffer through, or we all deal with what we would consider to be negative experiences, or experiences that we wish were different in some way. And some of those experiences we kind of hide, but there's like a hierarchy, right? So if I think about, my parenting, or if you think of if your mom, if my grandmother thought about her parenting, it's like, well, what stands out to me? Maybe I didn't feel so much loved. I didn't feel like I was a priority in my household. So I want to correct that in the next generation. What stood out to you? Well, maybe I didn't get as much of the hugs and kisses. I didn't get as much of the words of affirmation as would have been nice. So I'm going to make sure I correct that for my next generation, right? So in each generation, we're always trying to iterate on, well, how do I improve? At least if we're, if we really care and we're intentional about it. And that's just a continuous thing. And if we, as we mature, understand that that's how it will always be, it removes some of the shame that a lot of parents go through with, oh, I didn't do enough, right? Or look, my child is upset with me for X, Y, and Z reason, and that means I'm a failure as a parent. I didn't give them everything that they needed. When in essence, you can never give another person absolutely everything that they need, because we're always searching for, well, what do I like and what don't I like? And there's always something to not like, or there's always something to say, well, it could be better. That could be better, right? You could have given me, right? I could say, well, yeah, it would have been nice if you gave me a lot of gifts growing up as a kid. Sure, that would have been nice. But the mature person says, well, I know that you were doing the best you could, right? And
right,
that's even more important and more special to think about, when a person is just giving you their best in spite of where there might be lack, in spite of where there might not be tools that they can pull from, where there might not be education that they can expand upon and share with you. They're giving you all of them, right? Whatever that
right,
whatever that mix may be. And that is love,
mhm,
right? Like that is another definition of love. I'm giving you all I have. Now all I have still might fall short in some areas that you may wish were more, right? But sorry, I can't change that in the moment, but I can give you everything, right? So it's much better than the alternative feeling of, you're withholding from me, right? You have it to give.
right,
You won't give it to me. Or I see you give this to other people, but you don't share that same thing with me. I see how you love and you care for and you pour into others, but when it comes to me, you won't give that to me, right? So it's a very it's a I think a breakthrough spiritually even to understand that people who love you are just doing the very best that they could. This is an experience that I had with my father, right? So you mentioned being a single mother, and raising us on your own for the majority of our lives, our childhood. And I had to come to an understanding as an adult that my dad, even though he wasn't there and even though he wasn't present, and there could be a long list of things that I say, I wish, I wish, I wish, I wish.
Right.
At the end of the day, he was doing the best he could, right? And some of that comes from understanding his own experience with his own father, right? And how his experience with me was again a net positive change on what he had experienced. I can poke holes in it and say how it could have been better and you should have done this and that. But in if I think about it from a grander scheme of things, he did the best he could with the tools he had. And then
Right.
it's a blessing to me to be able to experience and to digest that experience and not have anger towards him, not have resentment or unforgiveness towards him, but to say, okay, now how can I do even better in these other areas for my own children? That's one side of the
Mhm.
coin. The other side of the coin is, and I realize that my children will have complaints about me. And they'll be able to point out to me one day in the future, Dad, I wish you would have done this, or you didn't do this in this way that I would have wished. You didn't hug me as much as I would have liked to be hugged, or whatever. You were so busy trying to provide for me and take care of me and all the things that you thought were important being there for me. And it would have been nice if you just would have done this other thing, right? That's maybe in my blind spot right now because of my own traumas that I'm looking to correct in the next generation.
Right.
So we can go through this cycle of back and forth and kind of a trauma dumping of sorts, but realistically, it's I think things come down to forgiveness and understanding that we're all human and that the best form of love is the love expressed by someone who's giving you all that they have, no matter how broken they may be.
Greetings and happy Mother's Day. This is Crissina Johnson. Thank you for tuning in to this conversation between my eldest son and I. I want to invite you to a live discussion that we will be scheduling within the next few days regarding this conversation. There was so much to unpack and we just could not get to everything. So once you watch the series, I believe it's 5 episodes. Once you watch those 5 segments, please prepare yourself, tune in, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a comment. Let us know that you are interested in meeting us personally in a virtual setting where we can get some of your specific questions answered, where we can engage with you. You can ask us some very specific questions and we'll just have a ball. But in the meantime, happy Mother's Day. We appreciate you. We value you. No matter what your experience as a mom has been, we want you to know that you are valued, you are appreciated, and you are loved. Make today the most amazing Mother's Day ever. And we look forward to meeting you really soon. Bye-bye.